I never thought my own home would become a battlefield. But the moment my husband looked me in the eye and said, "Mike and Laura are moving into our bedroom," I knew my place in this house was never mine to begin with. I'm Hannah, and for years, I built a life with Ryan, only to realize I was just a provider, not a partner. My money, his to spend, my space, his to give away. And when I finally said enough, that's when everything spiraled out of control. I walked into my bedroom, but it wasn't mine anymore. My husband stood there, tossing my things into boxes like I was just another piece of furniture being moved out of the way. That was the moment I knew I wasn't his wife. I was just an obligation he no longer cared to respect. And what happened next changed everything. The alarm clock buzzed at 6:45 a.m., but I had already been awake for an hour. Sleep had become a rare luxury, and my mind constantly raced with deadlines, unfinished projects, and the weight of running a household practically on my own. I pulled the sheets off, moving carefully to avoid disturbing Ryan. He had stayed up late watching TV in the living room again, his usual routine ever since he lost his job. I slipped into my robe and padded down the hallway, heading straight to the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, but the warmth of it did nothing to ease the tension in my chest. Today was a big day. I had a presentation with a high-profile client at the firm, one that could elevate my career if it went well. I grabbed my phone from the counter and instinctively checked my bank account, a habit that had become second nature since Ryan started treating our joint finances as his personal playground. My breath caught in my throat. A $5,000 withdrawal. I stared at the screen, willing the numbers to change, to be some kind of error. But there it was, a gaping hole in our savings, money I had meticulously put aside for bills, emergencies, and for the simple reassurance that I had control over at least one thing in my life. My fingers clenched around the phone as I heard heavy footsteps behind me. Ryan strolled into the kitchen, stretching his arms as if he had just awoken from the best sleep of his life. He yawned, rubbing his jaw, then grabbed a mug from the cupboard and poured himself coffee. "Morning," he mumbled, not even sparing me a glance. I tightened my grip on my phone. "Did you take $5,000 from our account?" Ryan took a slow sip of coffee, his expression unreadable. "I invested it." He leaned against the counter, completely at ease. "Don't worry, you make good money." I stared at him in disbelief. "You invested it?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. He finally met my gaze, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Yeah, a business opportunity came up. Look, it's gonna double in no time." I let out a breath, my pulse hammering in my ears. "You can't just take money like that, Ryan. We're supposed to discuss these things." Ryan sighed heavily, as if I were an inconvenience. "You act like we're broke, Hannah. You pull in 10 grand a month, and I've been out of work. Yeah, but I'm making moves." I set my phone down carefully, my hands shaking from frustration. "This isn't about the amount. It's about the fact that you didn't even ask me. You don't get to just take money from our savings without talking to me." He rolled his eyes. "Jesus, you're dramatic. It's just money, Hannah. You'll make more." The sheer audacity of his words sent a chill through me. This wasn't the first time he had done something like this, but every time I pushed back, he treated me like I was overreacting, like my concerns were invalid. I had been working myself to exhaustion, sacrificing weekends, skipping vacations, just to keep our household afloat, and he dismissed it like it was nothing. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Put it back, Ryan," he scoffed. "It's already tied up. Relax, I know what I'm doing." I clenched my jaw, knowing this conversation was going nowhere. Pushing further would only lead to another fight, and I couldn't afford that. Not today, not with my presentation looming over me. I turned away, willing myself to focus on something else, anything else. But then his voice came again, casual, almost an afterthought. "Oh, by the way, Mike and Laura are moving in." I froze. I turned back to face him slowly. "What?" He took another sip of coffee. My brother and Laura, they need a place to stay for a while, so they're moving in. I blinked, struggling to process what I was hearing. For how long? Ryan shrugged, unconcerned. No idea, but they'll take our bedroom. I let out a sharp laugh, not out of amusement, but out of sheer disbelief. Our bedroom? I repeated, my voice shaking. Are you kidding me? He finally looked up, his expression hardening. They need space. The guest room's too small. It just makes sense. It just makes sense. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. This was my home. I paid the mortgage. I paid the bills. I worked to keep this roof over our heads. And now, not only was my opinion ignored, but I was being shoved aside. Again. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. Ryan, this is my home. I deserve a say in this. His jaw tightened. This is my home, too. I swallowed back the sharp words threatening to spill out. And where am I supposed to sleep? Ryan was already walking away. I pulled into the driveway, just as the last rays of sunlight stretched across the pavement. The weight of the day clung to me, exhaustion settling deep into my bones. All I wanted was a hot shower, a quiet meal, and the comfort of my own bed. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. Suitcases lined the hallway, their bulky frames blocking the path to the stairs. Voices carried from the second floor, familiar but unwelcome. I hurried up, my pulse quickening. When I reached the master bedroom, my stomach twisted. Mike and Laura were inside, their belongings spilling onto my bed. Laura unzipped a suitcase, casually pulling out folded clothes, while Mike tossed a duffel bag onto the dresser. They moved with the ease of people settling into a space they had every right to occupy. My space. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. Ryan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Watching me like this was just another normal evening. I turned to him, struggling to keep my voice steady. We didn't talk about this. I live here too. Ryan smirked, unfazed. You'll manage. I clenched my fists. Where am I supposed to sleep? Ryan pushed off the doorframe, strolling past me into the hallway. He gestured vaguely toward the living room downstairs. You can take the couch. I let out a breath, trying to process what was happening. The couch? My voice came out sharp, disbelief cutting through the exhaustion. Ryan shrugged. It's temporary. Don't make a big deal out of it. I looked back at the bedroom. My nightstand was gone, my books stacked carelessly in boxes. The framed picture of my parents that once sat beside my bed was now wedged between a pile of folded sheets. This wasn't temporary. I turned back to Ryan. You didn't even ask me. His eyes darkened. I don't have to ask you, Hannah. This is my family. They needed a place. End of story. I swallowed hard. End of story? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Mike and Laura didn't even glance up, pretending not to hear the conversation happening just feet away from them. The injustice of it all burned in my chest. I was the one keeping this house afloat, the one sacrificing nights, weekends, my sanity just to make sure we could afford to live here. And now, I wasn't even allowed the dignity of my own space. I took a step toward Ryan. No, I said firmly. This is not okay. Ryan's jaw tensed. You're overreacting. I shook my head, the realization settling like a heavy weight in my stomach. I wasn't a wife. I was an afterthought. The final confirmation came when I reached into my pocket for my phone. If he wouldn't listen to reason, maybe Emily would. Maybe I could stay with her for a few nights, clear my head. Before I could unlock the screen, Ryan's hand shot out, snatching the phone from my grasp. You're not calling anyone, he said flatly. My heart pounded. Give it back. Ryan held the phone just out of reach, his grip tightening. We're not doing this tonight, he muttered. You're tired. Just go downstairs. I stood there, frozen. For years I had bent, compromised, sacrificed, and now I had nothing left. I turned on my heel and walked out without another word. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My breath came in uneven gasps, my chest rising and falling with the effort of holding back the wave of emotions threatening to break free. The streetlights outside cast long shadows across the pavement, but I barely noticed. My hands trembled as I unlocked my phone and pressed Emily's number. She answered on the second ring. "Hannah, what's wrong?" Her voice was sharp with concern, and that was all it took. The knot in my throat tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. "Hannah? I need to see you," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Where are you?" I swallowed, trying to steady myself. "The Magnolia Cafe." "I'm on my way. Stay there." The call ended, leaving me alone with the deafening silence of my car. 15 minutes later, Emily slid into the seat across from me at our usual corner booth. She studied me carefully, her sharp eyes scanning my face as if trying to piece together what had happened before I could even say the words. I stared down at my coffee, watching the steam curl into the air. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Ryan is taking everything from me," I whispered. "Even my bedroom." Emily set her cup down with a quiet thud. "You need to get out of there." I let out a shaky breath, the weight of her words pressing against the part of me that still hesitated. But where would I go? "With me," she said without hesitation. "You're not going back there." I lifted my gaze to meet hers, searching for reassurance, for something to ground me. Emily had always been the strong one, the one who never let anyone push her around. I used to be like that once, didn't I? My phone vibrated on the table, breaking the moment. The screen lit up with Ryan's name. "Where are you? Come home now." Emily snatched the phone before I could react. She stared at the screen, her lips pressing into a thin line. Then, with a decisive movement, she blocked the number. "You don't owe him anything," she said firmly, sliding the phone back toward me. I exhaled slowly, the finality of her action settling over me. For the first time, I saw my life for what it had become. Trapped, suffocating, controlled. I straightened my shoulders. "I'm leaving." Emily's expression softened, a hint of relief crossing her face. "Good," she said. "Let's go." For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. I zipped up my overnight bag, my hands trembling with every movement. My heart pounded against my ribs as I scanned the room one last time, making sure I had everything I needed. The bedroom felt foreign now, stripped of warmth, stripped of any sense of belonging. Just as I reached for the door handle, Ryan's voice cut through the silence. "Where do you think you're going?" I froze. His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that sent a warning down my spine. I turned slowly to see him standing in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He was blocking my way, his presence filling the space between us, turning the already stifling room into something unbearable. "I'm staying with Emily tonight." I forced my voice to stay steady, but the air between us thickened as the words settled. Ryan let out a low, humorless laugh, stepping forward. "That's not happening." I gripped the strap of my bag tighter. "This isn't up for discussion," I said, lifting my chin. He took another step closer. "You think you can just walk out?" His tone was incredulous, as if I had suggested something impossible. "This is your home. I'm your husband." His words twisted in my gut, but I didn't back down. "My home?" I gestured around the room, my frustration spilling over. "You gave it away. You didn't even ask me. You don't ask me about anything anymore." Ryan's jaw tightened. "You're overreacting. Mike and Laura needed help. We're family." I shook my head, my pulse roaring in my ears. "Family doesn't treat each other like this." He scoffed, his face hardening. "You belong here, Hannah. You're my wife." The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. Not as a statement of love, but as a declaration of ownership. I swallowed hard. "No, Ryan." The words felt foreign on my tongue, but they carried a weight I had never allowed myself to hold before. "I don't belong to you, and I'm leaving." I tried to push past him, but his hand shot out, fingers wrapping around my wrist. His grip was tight, his knuckles white. "You're not going anywhere!" I forced myself to meet his gaze. "Yes, I am." I yanked my arm free, my skin burning from where his fingers had been. For a second, I thought he might grab me again, that he might do something worse. His fists clenched at his sides, his body tense, but he didn't move. Instead, he took a step back and exhaled sharply through his nose. "If you walk out that door, don't come back." I hesitated, not because I wanted to stay, not because I doubted my decision, but because I knew, in that moment, that this was it, the final breaking point. I reached for the doorknob. Ryan didn't try to stop me this time. I stepped out into the hallway, my breath shallow, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. The air felt different outside the bedroom, lighter, even though the weight of years still clung to me. I descended the stairs quickly, not trusting myself to linger. My hands shook as I unlocked the front door, stepping into the cold night air. I half expected him to come after me, to grab my arm again, to say something to pull me back in. But when I turned to glance over my shoulder, he was still standing in the bedroom doorway, watching. I ran to my car, fumbling with my keys. My fingers were clumsy, my breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts. I forced myself to focus, to start the engine, to drive. The house shrank in my rearview mirror, and Ryan was still standing there. I didn't stop driving until I reached Emily's apartment. The moment I stepped inside, she pulled me into a tight hug, her arms wrapping around me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "You did it," she whispered. "You're safe now." Relief flooded through me, but beneath it was something else, something sharp, something lingering, because I knew this wasn't over. I stared into the swirling steam rising from my tea, my hands wrapped around the warm ceramic mug, but the chill in my chest refused to fade. My whole body still trembled, the adrenaline from my escape wearing off, but leaving behind exhaustion and uncertainty. Emily sat across from me at her small dining table, her apartment filled with the familiar scent of vanilla candles and fresh coffee. It should have been comforting, but all I felt was the gnawing sense of unease. Emily reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "You're safe now," she said, her voice steady. "But Ryan won't just let this go, will he?" I swallowed hard. "No," I admitted. "He won't." The weight of that truth pressed down on me. Ryan had always gotten his way, always dismissed my concerns, always expected me to bend. The idea of him simply accepting that I had left felt impossible. Emily leaned back, exhaling sharply. "Then we have to be smart about this." She stood, grabbed her laptop from the counter, and flipped it open. "You need to talk to a lawyer." The words made my stomach twist. I had thought about leaving before. I had imagined what life could be like without him. But actually, taking the steps to make it real, to end this marriage legally, felt overwhelming. "Divorce," I murmured, the word foreign on my tongue. "I never thought I'd be doing this." Emily's eyes softened. "You deserve better, Hannah. And you don't have to do this alone." I took a shaky breath and nodded. We searched for attorneys in the area, scrolling through profiles and reading reviews. My hands felt cold as I scrolled past law firms specializing in domestic cases, the reality of my situation pressing into me with every click. Emily didn't hesitate. She clicked on a name, dialed the number, and handed me the phone. It rang twice before a calm, professional voice answered. "Lisa Grant, Family Law. How can I help?" I swallowed, my throat dry. "Hi, I need to file for divorce," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a brief pause before Lisa's voice came back, firm but kind. "All right. Why don't you tell me a little about your situation?" I exhaled, forcing myself to speak. As I explained, Lisa listened, occasionally interjecting with clarifying questions. She didn't sound surprised by any of it. That, more than anything, made me realize how common stories like mine must be. When the call ended, I placed the phone on the table, my hands shaking again. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from something else. I was doing this. I was really leaving him. Emily smiled at me, pride shining in her eyes. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the table. Ryan. I didn't want to look, but my hands moved on their own. The screen glowed with a series of messages. Come home now. You're making a mistake. You'll regret this. I inhaled sharply, my stomach twisting. Emily snatched the phone before I could react. She read the messages, her expression darkening. Then, without a word, she blocked the number and set the phone down. No more, Hannah, she said, her voice unwavering. He doesn't get to control you anymore. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Lisa's words echoed in my mind. The first thing tomorrow, we'll file for a restraining order. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to hope. I turned to Emily, gripping her hand tightly. I'm really doing this, I whispered. I'm really leaving him. She squeezed my hand. Yes, she said. You are. And for the first time, I believed it. Bang, bang, bang! I shot upright, my breath catching in my throat. My pulse pounded in my ears as I tried to orient myself in the darkness. It took a second for the haze of sleep to clear, for me to remember where I was. Emily's apartment. Safe. Away from Ryan. Or at least, I had thought so. Another loud bang shook the front door. I scrambled out of bed, my feet hitting the cold wooden floor. Emily was already in the hallway, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She pressed a finger to her lips, then tiptoed toward the door, peering through the peephole. She inhaled sharply. It's Ryan, she whispered. My stomach twisted into knots. Another pound against the door. Then his voice, thick with anger, and something else. Alcohol. Hannah, open the door. We need to talk. Emily's fingers tightened around her phone. I'm calling the cops, she murmured, stepping back. No, I whispered, shaking my head, my body frozen. I knew calling the police was the right thing to do. I knew it. But fear paralyzed me, wrapped itself around my chest, squeezing tight. Ryan's voice turned sharp, almost pleading. Hannah, come on, don't be like this. Just let me in. We can fix this. I clenched my jaw. Fix this? After everything? Emily's thumb hovered over the call button. This is your call, she said quietly. I hesitated. Then Ryan's voice changed. You think you can just walk away from me? His tone was darker now, all softness gone. You think you can leave me, and I'll just let it happen? My breath came in short, shallow gasps. He pounded the door again. You'll regret this, Hannah. You'll see. Emily pressed the call button. The seconds stretched out like hours as we stood frozen, waiting. My hands balled into fists, my nails digging into my palms. I had spent years making excuses for Ryan, convincing myself that he would never hurt me. But this was different. The faint wail of sirens grew louder, cutting through the silence of the night. Red and blue lights flooded the apartment through the curtains. The pounding stopped. Ryan stumbled back, his silhouette barely visible in the glow of the flashing lights. I could see him standing there, his hands clenched at his sides, his body vibrating with barely contained rage. Cops? His voice was thick with disbelief. You called the cops on me? Emily didn't answer. The officers moved in quickly. I couldn't make out their words, but I heard Ryan's angry protests, saw the way his body tensed. My hands trembled as I wrapped my arms around myself. Emily pulled me away from the door, her voice low and steady. It's over, Hannah. But I wasn't sure I believed that. The next morning, I sat across from Lisa Grant, my hands resting on the cool surface of her desk. A stack of papers lay in front of me. The words blurred together, but I already knew what they said. Restraining order. Lisa pushed a pen toward me. This will keep him away, she said. But you need to be prepared. Men like Ryan don't give up easily. I picked up the pen, my fingers curling around it. For years, I had let Ryan control me. Let him dictate my choices, my thoughts, my life. But not anymore. I signed my name at the bottom of the page. I'm ready to fight for my freedom, I said. And for the first time, I truly meant it. My phone buzzed against the table, the vibration rattling against the wood. I stared at the unknown number flashing on the screen, my pulse quickening. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my gut told me to answer. I hesitated before swiping to accept. Hannah? The voice was familiar, though strained, as if forced through years of bitterness and exhaustion. It's Linda, Ryan's mother. We need to talk. I sat frozen, gripping the phone tightly. The last time I had spoken to Linda had been at a family gathering months ago, before things had spiraled. She had always been polite, distant, never fully acknowledging the cracks in her son's behavior. What do you want? My voice came out sharper than I intended. Linda sighed. Can we meet? I hesitated, then glanced over at Emily, who was pouring herself another cup of coffee in the kitchen. She raised an eyebrow at my expression. Where? There's a coffee shop on 6th, Linda said. Nothing dramatic. I need to talk to you. I should have said no. Every instinct screamed that I owed this woman nothing, but curiosity won. An hour later, I sat across from her in a quiet corner of a cafe, the smell of roasted beans thick in the air. Linda looked tired. Her fingers trembled slightly as she stirred her coffee, her eyes avoiding mine. Ryan's not handling things well, she said finally. He's falling apart. I clenched my jaw. That's not my problem anymore. She sighed, rubbing at her temple. I know you think that, but he's my son, Hannah. I folded my arms. And he was my husband. And yet, here we are. Linda exhaled slowly. He needs help. Maybe if you talk to him. I set my cup down hard enough that the liquid inside rippled. No. Her eyes met mine for the first time, searching, pleading. He's drinking more. He's not eating. He lost his job. I shook my head. He made his choices, Linda. I'm not responsible for him anymore. She swallowed hard, then looked down at her hands. She trailed off, then sighed. When she looked up again, something in her expression had changed. I'm just saying, desperate people do desperate things. My stomach twisted. Was that a warning? I asked, my voice low. Linda gave a small shake of her head, her mouth pressed into a tight line. She didn't say anything else as she stood, grabbed her purse, and walked out of the cafe. I sat there, gripping the table edge, my mind racing. Was she warning me or threatening me? I fumbled for my phone and dialed Emily's number. She picked up on the second ring. I think Ryan's getting worse, I whispered. We need to be careful. That night, I checked the locks on every door and window in Emily's apartment. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel safe. The apartment door creaked as I stepped outside. Fresh air filled my lungs, but the momentary relief vanished as my eyes landed on the small object resting against the doorstep, a single red rose. My breath hitched. My pulse pounded in my ears. A small note was tied to the stem with a thin ribbon. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the paper. You were always beautiful when you were mine. My stomach twisted. The handwriting was unmistakable. Ryan. I swallowed hard, glancing around the quiet apartment complex. The parking lot was empty except for a few cars. The streetlights flickered dimly. My skin prickled, the overwhelming sensation of being watched crawling over me like a second skin. I backed up, stepping inside and locking the door. Emily stood in the kitchen, stirring a cup of tea. When she saw my face, she set the mug down immediately. Hannah, what's wrong? Wordlessly, I held up the note. Her expression darkened as she snatched it from my hand, reading the words. Her jaw tightened. That's it. We're calling the police. I hesitated. I knew Ryan was pushing boundaries. I knew this wasn't normal. But part of me, the part still conditioned to second-guess everything, whispered. Maybe I was overreacting. Emily didn't wait for me to decide. She grabbed her phone, her voice sharp as she spoke into the receiver. Yes, we need an officer to come by. Restraining order violation. An hour later, Detective Martinez stood in the living room, flipping through his notebook. He was in his early 40s, his face lined with the kind of exhaustion that came from dealing with situations like these too often. He exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Technically, he hasn't broken the restraining order yet. He hasn't physically approached you. I clenched my fists. So I have to wait for him to actually hurt me before you can do something? Martinez's gaze softened slightly. No, but there's a process. We can document this, increase patrols near the apartment, but right now, all we can do is be cautious. Cautious. I wasn't sure how much longer I could live like this. Emily crossed her arms. And where is Ryan now? Martinez checked his phone. A frown creased his forehead. His apartment is empty. He hasn't been there for days. His employer reported he hasn't shown up to work either. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Ryan was gone, and no one knew where he was. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay awake, every creak and whisper of the wind sending a fresh wave of paranoia down my spine. Emily had double-checked every lock before heading to bed, but it didn't ease the unease creeping through me. I sat up, rubbing my temples, trying to convince myself this was all in my head. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw something shift outside the window. A shadow. My breath caught in my throat. I forced myself to move, stepping closer, heart hammering against my ribs. The shadow was gone. Had I imagined it? I shook my head, forcing myself to step back. Maybe it was just exhaustion, paranoia playing tricks on me. I climbed back into bed, closing my eyes. The sound of shattering glass ripped through the silence. I bolted upright. A scream echoed from the other room. Emily. I lunged for the bedside lamp, gripping it tightly in my hands. My mind screamed at me to move, to run, but my body was frozen in terror. Ryan was here, inside the apartment. Ryan stood in the dim light of the apartment, his breath heavy, his eyes wild. His presence sucked the air from the room, filling it with the weight of something dark and inevitable. You left me, Hannah, he murmured, his voice eerily calm. But I won't let you forget me. My entire body locked up. Every muscle screamed at me to run, but my feet felt cemented to the ground. Emily stood behind me, gripping her phone, her knuckles white. Get out! She spat, her voice sharp. Ryan ignored her. His gaze was locked on me, his hands curling into fists at his sides. You don't get to walk away, he said, stepping forward. I took a step back. Ryan moved faster. Before I could react, his hand clamped around my wrist, his grip bruising. If I can't have you, he whispered, his fingers tightening like a vice. No one will. Panic exploded in my chest. My breath came in shallow gasps, my vision tunneling. But something inside me, something deeper, something stronger, snapped into place. Number not this time. I had spent years shrinking under Ryan's control, molding myself into something smaller, something quieter. I had let fear dictate my choices. But not anymore. I wasn't that woman anymore. I clenched my free hand into a fist and drove my elbow into his ribs as hard as I could. Ryan grunted in pain, stumbling back just enough for me to yank my arm free. My pulse roared in my ears, but my body knew what to do. A sharp kick to his knee sent him staggering, his balance thrown. Emily was shouting something, but I barely heard her over the sound of my own heartbeat. Ryan recovered quickly, his face twisting in rage. You think you're strong now? He sneered, his voice venomous. You think you can fight me? I planted my feet, my chest heaving. I know I can. Emily's voice cut through the tension. The cops are here. The blare of sirens filled the night. Flashing red and blue lights poured through the windows. Ryan's entire body went rigid. His eyes darted toward the door, realization dawning. He had lost. For the first time I saw it. His mask cracking, the weight of his actions sinking in. 2 officers burst through the entrance, guns drawn. Hands where we can see them! Ryan didn't move at first, but when he finally raised his arms, there was a slight tremble in his hands. I watched as the officers forced him to his knees, handcuffing him. As they pulled him to his feet, he turned to me, his expression unreadable. For years, I had feared this moment, feared what it would take to finally be free. But as I met his gaze one last time, I felt nothing. No fear, no guilt, no doubt. "You don't control me anymore," I said, my voice steady. The officers led him away, his protests fading into the night. Weeks later, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, the morning sun warming my skin. A steaming cup of coffee rested between my palms, the scent of roasted beans filling the crisp air. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe. My phone buzzed beside me. A text. Ethan Collins. "Lunch tomorrow. No pressure, just friends." A small smile played on my lips. I picked up the phone, my fingers hovering over the screen for a moment, before I typed out a simple reply. "Tomorrow sounds good." Looking back, I never thought I'd have the strength to walk away. I spent so long convincing myself that sacrificing my happiness for someone else was just part of love, part of marriage. But I was wrong. Love should never make you feel invisible. Love should never strip you of your voice, your home, or your dignity. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was realizing I deserved to. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. No one has the right to take away your peace. No one gets to dictate your worth. If you ever find yourself questioning whether you should stay in a place that makes you feel small, unheard, or afraid, please remember, you are stronger than you think, and you are never as alone as you feel. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to stand up for yourself, even when it felt impossible? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If this story touched you in any way, type 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with this video, let me know why. I'm always open to different perspectives. If you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next one. Thank you for watching, for being here, and for being part of this conversation. I can't wait to see you in the next story. Stay strong, stay true to yourself, and take care.